Everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going super small, like molecular level small, to explore the incredible world of proteins.
Proteins, yeah, they really are fascinating.
I think everyone kind of knows the word proteins, like we hear about them in food and our bodies and stuff, but I think actually understanding them is something else entirely.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, they're really the foundation for so much of biology.
So to help us unpack all this, we've got a really interesting mix of sources for this deep dive.
We do.
We've got some excerpts from scientific papers.
Nice.
We've got some study guides for bio students.
Cool.
And we've even got a script for like a fun educational video about proteins.
Awesome. I love that variety. Should make for an interesting deep dive.
Yeah. So by the end, you'll not only understand the basics of proteins, but I think you'll come away with this like deeper appreciation for how complex and amazing they are.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so first things first, let's answer the most basic question. What are proteins even made of?
So it all starts with these tiny building blocks called amino acids.
Okay, amino acids.
Yeah. And there are 20 different types, each with their own unique, like, chemical properties.
So are these amino acids, are they kind of like a molecular alphabet or something?
Exactly. That's a great way to think about it.
Okay.
So just like the order of letters, spells out different words, the sequence of these amino acids determines what the protein is and what it does.
So that's what our sources mean when they talk about the different levels of protein structure, right? Like primary, secondary, tertiary.
Yeah, exactly.
What's all that about?
Okay, so imagine like you're building a story.
Okay.
The primary structure is like the simplest level, right? It's just the straight sequence of amino acids, like letters in a word.
Okay.
Then things start to get more interesting.
Uh-oh.
That chain of amino acids starts to twist and fold into these like spirals and sheets.
Okay.
And that forms the secondary structure, like words combining into sentences.
Okay, cool.
But it doesn't stop there. Then that whole thing folds even further into a really complex 3D shape, and that's the tertiary structure.
So it's like the whole paragraph is forming now.
Precisely. And sometimes you even have multiple protein chains coming together to form like a super complex quaternary structure.
Okay, so basically a bunch of paragraphs making a whole story.
Exactly. And that's the crazy part, is that that entire process is dictated by that initial sequence of amino acids.
Wow. So if even one amino acid is out of place, it can mess up the whole protein.
Yeah, that's why protein folding is such a delicate process.
It's like a typo in an instruction manual.
Right. It can have some serious consequences.
Oh, man. Speaking of which, our sources mentioned these things called chaperone proteins.
Yes.
What
Chaperones.
is it all about?
So those are super interesting. They basically act as guides during the folding process, making sure that everything folds correctly and preventing like mishaps and tangles.
So they're like the quality control experts on the protein assembly line.
Yeah, exactly. Without them, our cells would be filled with these like misfolded proteins, which could cause all sorts of problems.
So it's like a whole system working together.
Totally.
Okay, so we've talked about what proteins are made of and how they're structured.
Right.
But now I'm curious, like, what do they actually do?
Well, that's the really exciting part, because proteins, they do pretty much everything in a cell.
Yeah. No way, seriously.
Seriously. One of our sources even described proteins as like the orchestra of life, with each type playing a specific instrument.
Okay, I love that. The orchestra of life.
Yeah, so let's hear some of these instruments. We've got enzymes, which are like the catalysts.
What does that mean?
So they speed up chemical reactions, making things happen way faster than they normally would.
Oh, so they're like the super efficient workers.
Precisely. Like, for example, DNA polymerase, which helps replicate DNA with incredible speed and accuracy.
Oh, wow.
That's an enzyme.
Okay, cool. So what other instruments are there in this orchestra?
Well, you've got structural proteins, which are like the architects.
Okay, the architects.
Yeah, they provide support and shape to our cells and tissues.
So like collagen.
Yeah, collagen's a great example. It's like the scaffolding that holds our skin and bones together.
That makes sense.
Then we've got transport proteins, like tiny little delivery trucks.
Well, like what?
Hemoglobin, for example, which carries oxygen throughout our bloodstream,
Okay.
making sure that all our cells get the oxygen they need.
Wow, so are there proteins involved in like movement and stuff too?
Oh, absolutely. Those are the motor proteins. They're
Right.
like the engines that power our muscles.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So myosin, for instance, is responsible for muscle contraction. So every step you take, every heartbeat, that's myosin at work.
Wow, these proteins are seriously impressive.
I know, right? And we're not even done yet.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah, we've also got defense proteins, like antibodies.
The immune system.
Exactly. They're like tiny little soldiers patrolling our bodies, neutralizing invaders like bacteria and viruses.
So they're keeping us healthy.
Precisely. And last but not least, we have signal proteins, which are like the messengers.
Messengers.
Yeah, they transmit information between cells.
Okay.
Like hormones, for example.
Oh, so like insulin.
Exactly. Insulin is a signal protein that helps regulate blood sugar levels.
So it's like a hormonal text message telling cells to take up glucose.
That's a great way to put it.
Wow. It's incredible how these tiny molecules can be so specialized.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
Okay, so we've talked about the what and the how of proteins, but how are they actually made? Our sources keep mentioning this central dogma thing.
Ah, yes, the central dogma.
Sounds kind of mysterious.
Well, it's basically the recipe for life.
The recipe for life, okay.
It describes the flow of genetic information from DNA to RNA to protein.
Okay, so it all starts with DNA.
Right. DNA holds the blueprint, the instructions for building everything, but it needs a messenger to carry those instructions to the protein-making machinery.
And that messenger is?
RNA. Specifically messenger RNA or mRNA.
Okay, so the mRNA carries the message from DNA to what exactly? To the ribosomes.
Ribosomes.
Yeah, they're like the construction sites of the cell where proteins are actually built.
Okay, so the mRNA goes to the ribosome, and then what?
Then the ribosome reads the mRNA code and uses it to assemble a chain of amino acids.
So the ribosome is like a tiny 3D printer building proteins based on the instructions from mRNA.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
That's amazing.
It is right. But remember that newly formed chain of amino acids isn't functional yet.
Oh, right. We talked about that.
It needs to fold into that specific 3D shape, sometimes even undergoing some modifications along the way to become a fully operational protein.
Wow. That is a complex process.
It is, but it's happening constantly inside us all the time, trillions of times a second.
And it usually works flawlessly.
Yeah. Well, most of the time anyway, but that's a story for another deep dive.
Okay, good tease. I'm intrigued now.
But seriously, before we move on, there is something really mind-blowing about protein folding I wanted to share.
Oh, okay, what is it?
So you know how we talked about how complex that folding process is, right? Yeah, with all those different levels of structure.
Right. Well, the crazy part is that it happens so fast and so accurately, it's incredible.
Like how fast are we talking?
Some proteins fold in milliseconds.
Milliseconds.
Yeah, and it's happening in this super crowded environment inside the cell, and it still manages to be super precise. It's like watching 1,000 origami masters simultaneously folding these intricate structures with incredible speed and accuracy.
Whoa. That's a great image and kind of stresses me out thinking about it happening inside me right now.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's pretty mind-boggling.
Okay, well, speaking of mind-boggling, our sources also talk about dietary protein.
Yes.
Why is that so important, and what should we know about it?
Right. So remember those 20 amino acids we talked about?
Yeah, the building blocks.
Exactly. Well, 9 of those are considered essential.
What does that mean?
It means that our bodies can't make them on their own, so we have to get them from our food.
Oh, okay, so that's why we need to eat protein.
Exactly. But there's another layer to this.
Of course there is.
There's a distinction between complete and incomplete proteins.
Right, I've heard those terms before, but what's the actual difference?
So a complete protein contains all 9 of those essential amino acids in sufficient quantities.
Okay.
Most animal-based proteins like meat, fish, eggs, dairy, they all fall into this category.
So they're like a one-stop shop for all your protein needs.
Yeah, pretty much. But then you have incomplete proteins, which are missing 1 or more of those essential amino acids.
And those are mostly plant-based.
Many of them are, yeah. But there are exceptions like quinoa and soy, which are complete proteins.
Oh, good to know. So vegetarians and vegans can still get all the essential amino acids they need.
Absolutely. It just requires a bit more planning and combining different plant-based sources to make sure they're getting all 9.
Like beans and rice, for example.
Exactly. Beans and rice together provide a complete protein profile.
Cool. Okay, so it's not just about eating enough protein, but eating the right types.
Right. It's about quality and variety.
But I think that's enough protein talk for now.
For now.
We'll pick up this fascinating discussion in part 2 of our deep dive, so make sure you stay tuned.
See you there. Welcome back to our protein party.
Protein party. Okay, I like that. I'm into it.
Gotta keep things fun, right?
Right. But okay, in all seriousness, we just spent a whole episode talking about what proteins are, how they're made, you know.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
But why should our listeners actually care? Like, how does all this protein stuff actually impact our lives?
That's the key question, isn't it? I mean, it's one thing to understand the science, but it's another to connect it to our own experiences.
Exactly.
So think about it this way. Pretty much Everything that keeps you alive and functioning involves proteins in some way.
Okay, so like what? Give me some examples.
Well, digesting your food, for instance, that relies on enzymes, which are proteins.
Right, we talked about those.
Your muscles contracting so you can move, walk, run. That's thanks to motor proteins.
Right.
Even your thoughts and emotions involve complex signaling pathways that rely on proteins.
So basically, protein is involved in pretty much every aspect of our existence.
Pretty much, yeah. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is. Okay,
Eh.
but I'm also curious about the flip side. What happens if we don't get enough protein?
That's a good question, and it's definitely something to be mindful of because protein deficiency can lead to a whole bunch of problems.
Like what?
Well, for starters, your muscles can start to weaken and waste away.
Okay, that doesn't sound good.
You might feel constantly tired and fatigued.
Ugh.
Wounds might take longer to heal.
Okay.
And your immune system could become compromised, making you more susceptible to getting sick.
Okay. Yeah, none of that sounds fun.
Right. So it's really important to make sure you're getting enough protein in your diet.
But I feel like most people in like developed countries probably aren't protein deficient, right?
You're probably right, but
Right.
it's still something to be aware of, especially for people with certain dietary restrictions or those following vegetarian or vegan diets.
Right. Makes sense.
Because remember, it's not just about the quantity of protein you're getting, but also making sure you're getting all those essential amino acids.
So it's quality over quantity in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of quality, our sources mention some really interesting facts about how protein impacts our health beyond just avoiding deficiency.
Oh, okay. I'm all ears.
Well, one thing that really stood out to me was the role of protein in tissue repair.
Oh, yeah, like after exercise or an injury.
Exactly. So every time you work out or get injured, your body needs protein to rebuild and recover those muscles and tissues.
Okay, that makes sense because I always feel like I need a protein-rich snack after a good workout. Is there a reason for that?
There could be. Your muscles have literally undergone tiny tears during exercise, and they need those amino acids from protein to repair those tears and build back stronger.
So it's not just a gym bro myth. Protein actually does help after exercise.
Absolutely. It's like providing the building blocks for muscle growth and recovery.
So what other benefits does protein have for our health?
Well, a strong immune system also relies heavily on protein.
Oh, right, because antibodies are protein.
Exactly. Those little soldiers fighting off infections, they need protein to function properly.
So getting enough protein can actually help us stay healthy and fight off bugs.
Precisely. And don't forget about hormones. Many hormones, like insulin, are actually proteins themselves.
Oh, wow. So protein plays a role in regulating things like our blood sugar levels, too.
It does. And we're only just beginning to understand the full extent of protein's influence on our overall health.
Wow, it really is a jack of all trades.
It really is.
Mm.
But I think it's time to shift gears a bit.
Okay, where are we headed now?
Well, our sources also dive into the cutting edge of protein research, and it gets pretty futuristic.
Oh, this is what I love about these deep dives, getting a glimpse into the future. Okay, so what's on the horizon for protein science?
Well, one term that really caught my eye was proteomics.
Proteomics. Okay, that sounds pretty complex.
It is, but it's also incredibly exciting. Think of proteomics as the large-scale study of proteins.
Large scale like how?
Like looking at all the proteins in a cell, a tissue, or even an entire organism.
Whoa, so it's like taking a census of all the protein players.
Exactly. It's about understanding the whole protein network, not just individual proteins.
Okay, so what's the advantage of doing that?
Well, by analyzing the entire proteome, scientists can see how different proteins interact with each other.
Okay,
They can identify patterns and biomarkers for diseases.
interesting.
And they can even start to develop personalized medicine tailored to an individual's unique protein makeup.
So in the future, our healthcare could be based on our own personal protein profiles.
It's a real possibility. Proteomics has the potential to revolutionize healthcare, allowing for earlier disease detection, more targeted treatments, and even personalized drug development.
Wow, so it's like custom-made medicine based on your unique protein blueprint.
Yeah, pretty much. But proteomics isn't the only exciting area in protein research.
Like more.
Oh, yeah. We also have protein engineering, which is equally mind-blowing.
Protein engineering, what is that?
So scientists are basically designing and building new proteins with specific functions.
So they're not just studying existing proteins, they're creating entirely new ones.
Exactly. They're using all these sophisticated techniques like computer modeling and genetic engineering to manipulate protein structure and create proteins with properties and functions that don't even exist in nature.
Whoa, That's like giving proteins a whole new set of superpowers.
Exactly. And the applications are endless.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
Well, imagine proteins that can break down plastic waste, offering a solution to our pollution crisis, or proteins that act as tiny biosensors, detecting pollutants in the environment, or even disease markers in our bodies.
That's insane. It's like we can program proteins to do almost anything.
It's getting pretty close to that. And protein engineering is also revolutionizing the field of biomaterials.
Biomaterials.
Yeah, things like self-healing materials or even artificial organs made from proteins.
Oh, wow. The possibilities are endless.
They really are. And speaking of groundbreaking advancements, we can't forget about CRISPR-Cas9.
Oh, yeah. CRISPR, that's like the gene editing tool everyone's talking about.
Exactly. And it's actually based on a protein complex found in bacteria that allows for incredibly precise DNA editing.
Right. It's like a molecular scalpel, enabling scientists to make very targeted changes to DNA sequences.
Precisely. And its potential for curing genetic diseases is huge. And it's all thanks to our understanding of proteins.
That's amazing. So from personalized medicine to sustainable materials and even life-saving cures, it seems like proteins really are the key to a brighter future.
I think so too. And that brings us to the final part of our deep dive.
Oh, we're already there.
Time flies when you're talking about proteins, but don't worry, we've saved some of the most mind-blowing facts for last.
Okay, hit me with them. I'm ready to have my mind blown. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our protein deep dive, and I'm ready to have my mind blown like you promised.
All right, well, get this. The most abundant protein on Earth is called Rubisco.
Rubisco?
Yeah, Rubisco.
It rings a bell, but I can't quite place it.
Well, it's the key enzyme responsible for photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis, oh wow. So that's how plants convert sunlight into energy.
Exactly, and Rubisco is essential for that process, which basically powers almost all life on Earth.
So it's like the ultimate life-sustaining protein.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's incredible. Okay, what other protein facts do you have up your sleeve?
How about this? Spider silk, which is made of protein, is stronger than steel by weight.
No way, seriously.
Seriously, it's true.
I always knew spider webs were strong, but stronger than steel. That's insane.
It's true, and scientists are actually studying spider silk to try and understand how it's so strong and flexible.
Why?
Well, they're hoping to create new bio-inspired materials like, imagine bulletproof vests or suspension bridge cables made from synthetic spider silk.
Whoa, that's some next-level stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what these tiny proteins can do.
I know, I'm starting to see proteins everywhere now.
Haha, they are everywhere.
Yeah.
And speaking of being everywhere, did you know that the human body contains over 100,000 different types of proteins?
100,000. Are you serious?
I'm serious. It's mind-boggling.
And they're all working together inside us right now, performing all these different functions.
Yeah. It's like a symphony of molecular activity happening all the time.
That's kind of beautiful when you think about it.
It is. And each protein has its own unique story, its own intricate structure and purpose.
It makes you realize just how complex and amazing life really is.
Right. And as we continue to explore the world of protein science, who knows what other incredible discoveries await us?
Exactly. We've talked about personalized medicine, sustainable materials, life-saving cures.
Right.
It seems like proteins really do hold the key to a brighter future.
I think so too. And I hope this deep dive has sparked a sense of wonder and appreciation for these tiny titans of biology.
I think it's safe to say that our minds are officially blown.
Haha, mission accomplished.
We've gone from the basic building blocks of proteins to the frontiers of scientific discovery, and it's been an incredible journey.
And remember, the world of proteins is constantly evolving. New discoveries are being made all the time.
So who knows, maybe one of our listeners will be the one to make the next big breakthrough in protein science.
It could happen.
Well, that's it for our protein deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of the world around us.
See you then.